Building a portfolio and accumulating wealth requires a different mindset and strategy than using that portfolio to enjoy life during retirement. The transition involves a significant risk known as the sequence of returns risk, which can severely impact your financial security. If you haven't watched my earlier video on this topic, it's well worth your time, and I'll link it in the description below. In retirement, you want to enjoy life without worrying about the unpredictable market swings. This video will help you create a safe withdrawal plan to ensure your financial security in retirement, allowing you to maximize your enjoyment. And I will give you a better understanding of what you may need to retire also. I do hope you hit the like button and leave some comments below. I'd sure appreciate it. Now, the basic foundation that most methods try to address is finding the maximum safe withdrawal rate regardless of what may happen in the future, without the fear of running out of money. The first one we need to look at is what's often referred to as the 4% rule because the others build off of it. The 4% rule assumes that we want our portfolio to last 30 years and states that we can safely withdraw 4% of the balance in the first year and then adjust that amount for inflation each year going forward. So just as your Social Security payments get a COLA or cost of living adjustments every year, you adjust your withdrawal rates to the conditions of inflation determined by the CPI. The problem with the 4% rule is that most people don't really understand what it's protecting you from. The rule originated in a paper published in 1994 by William Bengen. Essentially, it's designed to precisely address the risk of the sequence of returns. The research looked at every 30-year period going back to 1926, and it determined that during the worst sequence of returns, starting out with a 4% withdrawal rate and adjusting for inflation would allow the portfolio to last 30 years. The study used a portfolio that was made up of 50% stocks using the SP 500 and 50% bonds. Bengen's goal was to determine the highest withdrawal rate possible during the single worst possible scenario in history. So you would have been safe during the worst possible period, at least looking backwards. But what about all those other 30-year periods that were not the worst case scenario? I'm going to look at what happens in those cases also. The 4% rule also is why some people say you need 25 times your income to retire. Let's say you want to withdraw $60,000 each year. Well, 25 times 60,000 is 1.5 million, and 4% of 1.5 million is 60,000. The 4% rule and the 25 times your income just really is doing the same thing. But you'll have some Social Security, and if you're married, you'll be getting 2 checks. You only need your portfolio to top off Social Security enough to get us to the total income you hope to have in retirement. Or you might even have a pension you just need to top off. Now, without delving too deep into the details of this study, there are a couple problems with it. First, it only considers a 30-year retirement. If you're part of the FIRE movement and you want to retire before the age of 60, you may need your retirement to last longer than 30 years. It also did not account for any fees someone may be paying on their retirement accounts. If you pay a 1% management fee on your portfolio, you can only withdraw 3% if you're using the 4% rule. If that advisor is charging you a 1% fee and they choose actively managed mutual funds to put you into, maybe paying a 0.75% expense ratio, now your total fees are 1.75%. So if you are using an advisor, don't forget to subtract off the total fees that you may be paying from the 4%. Also, there's going to be a big difference in what you have available to spend depending on whether your portfolio is in a taxable account or a tax-free account like a Roth account. Following this study was one done at Trinity University, which focused on portfolio success rates. One difference between the two studies is that Bengen's original research used a combination of the S&P 500 index with intermediate term government bonds for its asset mix. The Trinity study used long-term high-grade corporate bond returns instead. With the choice of more volatile corporate bonds, the sustainable withdrawal rate dipped slightly below 4% for a few of the periods. The Trinity study found that a 4% withdrawal rate only had a 95% success rate. Still pretty good though. Of course, there are other things to consider like your retirement age, which can determine the number of years we need your portfolio to last, the asset allocation we carry in retirement, and the exact sequence of returns you experience early on in retirement, and the inflation rate. However, in essence, the 4% rule addresses the risk of the sequence of returns quite well. It's protecting you from the worst case scenario. If you don't have some of those early negative returns in your portfolio, you are very likely to finish the 30-year period of retirement with much more money than you even started out with. In fact, in a more recent study by Michael Kitces, found that most historical safe withdrawal rates could have been much higher. So check out this chart. Using historical 30-year periods going all the way back to 1871, a 4% rule would have allowed you to survive the worst possible time to retire, which was 1966. However, if we take the median safe withdrawal rate, it's close to about 6.5%. Using a 60-40 stock to bond asset allocation for your investments. The reality is that if somebody uses a 4% rule, over 90% of retirees finish with more money than they even started out with after 30 years. And over 2/3 of the time, they finish with more than double their initial balance left over. The median wealth at the end of 30 years was almost 2.8 times the initial principal. In fact, retirees only had a 10% chance of finishing with less than 100% of their starting balance. And they also had a 10% chance of finishing with 6 times their initial starting balance. Think about that. If they started with a $1 million portfolio using the 4% rule, they are equally likely to finish with less than 1 million as they are to finishing with more than 6 million after 30 years. Now, no one knows for sure what the future rates of returns will be like for a portfolio, especially with the increased risk to the economy because of all the mounting government debt. However, the 4% rule was created to be successful in the worst 30-year period we have ever experienced. So the question is, how do you protect yourself from the worst case scenario but still allow yourself to enjoy your savings to the fullest? This same study proposes what's called the ratcheting safe withdrawal method. They considered some of the worst case periods where someone could have retired. They found that even during some of the worst times, any time your balance grows to be 50% above its initial balance after your withdrawals, the portfolio is already far enough ahead that it won't be depleted in a 30-year time horizon. Thus, you begin with a 4% withdrawal rate and adjust every year for inflation. But any time your portfolio hits 150% of your initial balance, you can ratchet up your spending by another 10% above that year's inflation rate. In other words, you give yourself a 10% raise. One caveat to this 10% extra bump, it can only occur every 3 years. So once you've taken the 10% raise over and above the inflation rate, you must wait 3 years before doing so again. Even if your portfolio is above the 150% threshold of the initial balance. This method still protects us from ever running out of money in the worst case scenario, but allows for some extra spending going forward if we don't get off to a bad start in the market. However, you could still end the 30-year period with a significant amount of unspent money. And some of that extra spending doesn't occur until later in retirement, when you may not have the same desires or need the extra spending. However, at least this excess wealth at the end is somewhat diminished, and this method does allow for increased spending with no risk of ever needing to take a spending cut. So those are a couple simple methods you can use for a safe withdrawal rate with little to no chance of ever running out of funds within 30 years. And they don't require any kind of a pay cut if things don't go well. They protect you from the perfect storm of high inflation and low returns in the early years of retirement. However, if the perfect storm doesn't occur during the first decade, they both run the risk of leaving a substantial amount of money unused. And you might have enjoyed some extra cash early in retirement when your health still allowed you to travel and enjoy other pursuits. There are other withdrawal methods. All have their pros and cons. Most of the others do require a little more management and adjustments throughout retirement. Some allow for initial withdrawal rates of 5 and even up to 6%, but they require a few more calculations and adjustments as you go. And those adjustments to your withdrawal rate do require a pay cut at times. If you would like to learn about more dynamic withdrawal rates, leave me some comments below and I'll make another video and cover some of the other methods. So ideally, you need a safe withdrawal rate early on, and that's probably when your health allows you to get out and enjoy life the most. If you start out with a 5 or 6% withdrawal rate and experience a rocky start to your portfolio, you'll have to be willing to ratchet back your spending, and usually people don't like to feel like they're going backwards and take a pay cut. Naturally, you'll have some Social Security to factor into your overall spending too. So when Social Security kicks in, that can help lower your withdrawal rate. I hope you found this video informative and understand the basic withdrawal strategies based around the 4% rule that you hear so much about. I hope you hit the like button. Please leave some comments below. And if you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Thank you.